Hey, thank you for that applause. That's fun to come in with that. Shout out to my producer. Hey everyone, happy Saturday. Wherever you are in the world, I am blessed to be here. Bless up, and it's May. It's is this the first, second Saturday in May, 2025. It's also Mother's Day weekend. So, shout out to all of the mothers, whether it's biological or non biological, because it's all sorts of ways to be a mother. I'm also thinking about the mothers who aren't with us anymore, our grandmothers and our ancestors, the future mothers, and those of us who, whether we have joy during this time, during this weekend, or we are going through stuff, my heart is here with you. Also, just grateful to have friends and family tuning in, associates. Please like and share. For those of you who are new to this experience or community, it's Sage Book Club, and it's a space that I'm cultivating to learn, to actually just discuss thought provoking books. I love to read. I've been able to re engage more deeply in my reading over the last couple of years. And when I come across some of these topics, especially ones that I think could help, the world, I want to share and I want to talk about it. So this is the purpose of this show podcast, is to talk about these thought-provoking books. So I kicked it off with the Michelle Obama Overcoming book. And that's right here. This was a supplement to her book, The Light We Carry. And I'm a real fan of Michelle Obama. I think she just keeps it so real. So that was a great book. And if you are interested in listening to previous um, of my shows, you can go back to my channel, Sage Dragon, or you can go to the Real HD Network, and those previous episodes were on there. That we did a deep dive in all the various topics that Michelle Obama was talking about, which was some good stuff related to living life, overcoming and going through resilience and living softly, and the power of friendships and showing up and going high. So that was really great. So now we are getting into a mental health month. So this month there's two books that I really plan to delve into. Today's discussion that I'm really excited about is on a book I just finished called The Anxious Generation: How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic in Mental Illness. I had seen this book on a couple of lists. I think Barack Obama, he does a list every year of his favorite books, summer reading list or something like that. I saw it there, and I saw it a couple of times. And, looking at the state of youth, especially what is we call Generation Z. And I have three. My children are in the Z generation. Shout out to Generation Z. We love y'all. And I just really get concerned with how there's certain messages that are really, really being aimed at all of us. Let's be real, but really at that Generation Z that were concerning to me. So when I saw this book, I was like, let me check this out. And I'm glad I did, because there's a lot of stuff that I want to talk to you all. I'd love to talk to you with. So again, please, this is interactive. So if you are listening in, I would love to have you join the chat, whether it's commenting or I guess you can't call in, but comment so we can talk about it. So let's get into this book. So the book first starts off with a introduction where the author is posing a question. Let me get back first to the author's name. Producer, do we have that there? Dr. Hold on a moment. Let me see. Okay, when we get his name up, I'll share it with you. I got that book out from the library and I it was overdue, so I wanted to return it. So that's why I don't his name is kind of cut off in there, but we'll drop it in the chat in case you want to look up some of his work. But he's a social psychologist. He's also a professor at NYU and presents a lot of data. All right, so let's get back to it. So the author is posing a question. So imagine if you are approached by a billionaire and you're a parent and they offer you an opportunity for your child to be part of an experiment, the first of its kind in the history of mankind to go to Mars. So they're presenting your kid. They're in the gifted and talented program, and they're coming up to you and they're like, we are picking some children to go to Mars. Your child is chosen because of some special thing. And they don't want any grown adults going because they said that children are the haven't developed yet. So they will be better suited to adapt to life on Mars. You do research and you find out that there's all sorts of risks with this radiation, the possibilities of permanent deformation. What would you do? You wouldn't do it, right? Hell no. I'm not going to send my kid up to Mars. This example, the author provides as a metaphor for what occurred in the early 90s and 2000s when Silicon Valley tech executives started to create these products without really researching, considering. It's not clear how much they knew or didn't know about the ramifications, but he's providing this example that the level of damage that has been done to youth, especially with the onset of smartphones and later on I'll get into things like video games and pornography and the 24/7 access of that for a 12-year-old was just as damaging as if we had sent them into Mars. That it was very, very damaging. So we'll talk more about this in the coming moments. So the book gets into it. They divide it into 4 sections. The first is a tidal wave, and that's where they present a lot of data on the issues. And then there's another section called the backstory, which talks about the decline of the play-based childhood, because the author is presenting the fact that the reason why Gen Z has the levels of anxiety that they do. Yes, we all have anxiety, and there's always been mental health challenges amongst adolescence. We know that's a very challenging time for those of us who've gone through it and who are witnessing nephews and nieces and kids going through it. That's one of the most challenging times of your life because of your hormones. So there always has been mental health issues, but you'll see in a moment the level of mental health problems skyrocketed when these smartphones and social media tools started becoming more accessible. However, the author's also talking about something else that led to this, which was the decline in a play based childhood. And this is part of the reason why I was interested in getting a number of you to talk about this, because this is problematic and we need to come up with some solutions for this. The third part of the book talks about the rewiring. So, how the mind started to become rewired and it became a phone based childhood. So, we went from having these play based childhoods of the 80s and the 90s where we were outside playing and unstructured ways, still the bacon, remember that? Double Dutch, patty cake, or just sitting there and looking at ants crawl by. All of that was beneficial. And then we went into this time period where children and youth weren't getting that free play. So Then on top of that, we moved to this rewiring, which is when kids just had 24/7 access to a phone. That's that rewiring. And then the final part of the book is about collective action for healthier children. So we're going to delve into all four parts. There's something else, though, that I was thinking. When I first saw this book, what drew me to it was I was actually hoping that the book was going to talk about, well, what do we do for the people that were impacted by this? Because if you think about it, smartphones and social media, them being linked. Because at first it was a flip phone, then it went to a smartphone, then it linked to these apps. So that started happening around 2010. So let's say there were children that was on the earliest onset of that were about 11 years old. And on the latter part, they're 17. So that whole age range between 2010 and 2015, those youth are now 20 between 26 and 20 and 32. They're part of a unique experience because they were the first cohort of people that had this technology introduced to them without, it's almost like going in, you know, without a condom or without protection. Now we know things. We know that it's not healthy, and yet we still let our people have these things, and we'll talk about that. But this group that had all of this access between 2010 and 2015, before this data started coming out, now they're young adults with high levels of anxiety, depression, just stress. Some of them might have taken their lives, and their families will never be the same. And there's no retribution for them, there's no healing. And I want to propose that something needs to be provided for them. I think that especially that group, but all of us really, you know. I remember, being in public health, which is my background. There was a settlement that the tobacco industries, once they started to prove that they knew that tobacco was harmful, they had to provide a lot of money to these states. And the states used those funds to create public health initiatives around like cancer prevention and cancer screenings and things. I think we need a similar model where we settle with these tech social media companies and have them funnel funds perhaps to the, maybe some non-for-profit organizations that can help us restore the things that we lost from a decade or and a half of this exposure. So that's the piece around healing for the impacted that I think we need to have some more conversations about. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. So let's get into the tidal wave. So this is the first slide. I'm telling, yeah, thank you. So it starts in the early 2010s, and I'll show data in this book. There was a major decline in the mental well-being of children, teens, and adolescents never before seen. So this is showing this. You see 2005, the steadiness of major depressive episodes in the last year for US teens, and it was like steady. And then look at that jump from 2010, and it's massive, especially amongst teen girls. So boys are also susceptible, but it really hit teen girls. And the sociologist that wrote this book points out these anxiety-based conditions. So not things like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, but like depression and feelings of self-worth and self-lack and just overly stressed about yourself. Those are the mental health conditions that increased. Let's look at this next slide here. it is like I said, it's mostly internalizing disorders like anxiety and depression. So again, 2008, bipolar, anorexia, substance abuse, and schizophrenia was maintaining a steady rate. But that anxiety and depression, those are the rates. The self-harm and the suicide drastically increased. Here's another slide. It hits younger people more than older people. Gen Z harder than any other generation. And the book gets into the whys behind that, because for those of us who knew it before, we didn't rely so heavily on, Facebook and Instagram and things like that. We had other things that built into us. But for groups that were really conditioned to have this be their main source of entertainment, it really took a hit on their anxiety, and the prevalence of it increased. Okay. Here's another one. It's not just self-report data. It's also behavioral data like self-harm and suicide. So I think, the author really wanted to do a thorough examination of the data, because when you're going up against a lot of forces, and we know that tech and social media, these entities get a lot of criticism. So I think they wanted to make sure that they really were thorough in making sure that this data was not something that they could look past. Look at this U.S. Emergency Department's self-harm, especially our girls. Between 2005, you always had it, 2010 comes around, 2011, 12, look at that, bam. It peaked at 2015 again, and then it just increased heavily by 2020. U.S. female emergency department visits for self-harm. And this is the different ages showing, especially like girls between 10 and 14, females 15 to 19, females 25 to 29. And boys, the story for boys was higher with the suicide rates that went up, and they were declining, because if you look like from the 70s, it had spiked and it went up, and then the 90s, then it kind of was coming down in the 2000s, and then it started to go back up again. And so now I have a little video that I wanted to show that I saw recently that I think aligns with some of what is going on with this social media. So can we cue that video?
Allowed to be ugly. No matter what you have, what you've accomplished, what you've done, what you succeeded in, being an ugly woman is unforgivable in society.
This generation, everybody want to be a bully. We bully for somebody for the way they look, the way they talk, how they dress, how they act, the type of music that they listen to. This is why nobody can be themselves, because everybody want to be a big bully on the internet.
We are living in the age of ununiqueness, online mean girls, and the public shaming of natural bodies. And honestly, it's getting ridiculous. As a woman, all I want to do is exist. But with the constant pressure of beauty standards, it feels like existing isn't enough anymore. Now, this video is not a rant. This is a breakdown. We're going to talk about the history of how we even got here, how platforms like TikTok are slowly morphing into Instagram 2.0, why bullying people for being normal is somehow trendy, and how every woman is not and does not have to be a baddie. So let's talk about it, because
okay. So I want to shout out the young lady that made that video, and I don't have her name in front of me, but I'll make sure that I put it in the link, because I had watched it, the whole video on YouTube. And I noticed that it looks like the ages of the young lady who wrote that probably is in that Gen Z time frame. And even using terms like ugly, just think about the pressure that young women are under to be perfect. And all of that came out of this time frame. So now we have to have whole videos and whole efforts to build people up, to lift people up, because the bullying and the online degradation is gotten out of control. So I really appreciate content creators like the young lady in the video. I think we need more of that to balance out these messages of you're ugly or you're not worthy or you're not whatever that has happened, and that continue to happen for our young girls. So as I was saying, the that tidal wave talked about all of the data. So to show, okay, this is bad. This is a train wreck, beyond a train wreck. But there's another whole dynamic that was going on here that the author pointed out, and it was a change in society. And this goes back from the 90s where free play went away. So at the social media and the introduction of all this technology, especially for kids and teens, is problematic. The other part that the author is really making in this book is that when things like the ability to just go outside and play and all the benefits that come from play went down, it also is damaging. So that was a picture of Sesame Street. You know, love our Sesame Street. And play, play is essential to the healthy development of a child. And is there a video? Is there a link there? There's a video that I wanted to queue up for a moment. And look at that. It's forbidden play in any game. That's kind of where we've gotten to now, where you don't see our youth just outside having the chance to be able to play. All right, I'm going to keep it going. Okay, no problem. We'll keep it going. So I had come across this blog called Play is the Work of Children, A Magical Childhood, with all these beautiful quotes on how important play is from different societies. Play is the only way the highest intelligence of humankind can unfold. Okay. The most effective kind of education is that a child should play amongst lovely things. I know that that's one of the philosophies of like the Montessori, how important, it is in those early ages. In the book, I remember the author making this point that 90% of the brain is developed by the time you're 10 years old. And then the development stops. So the way that our brains develop and we develop when we're born is it's fast, then it's slow, then it's fast again. So the fast is that first 3 years. That's why they say like you can teach a kid different languages and they'll pick up on it from 0 to 3 years old. Then it slows down, 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 up into puberty. Then puberty, there's another spurt. The author the psychologist was saying, that's all that the way that nature designed us to have those slow down periods and those fast periods, it's all perfect. It's a perfect part of our evolution. We need that slow down period. And, you see these efforts to try to force youth to develop quicker than their time, and some of that is being pushed online. That's also anti-kids because we kids need that growth and development, and they need play. Young mammals learn the skills they need to be successful as adults from repeated activity in low stake environments that play provide, like you're playing. And this might be like, what, kind of heady, but it's really not. If you see sometimes the state of society where younger adults or even middle-aged adults are struggling with being able to communicate with someone or resolve a conflict without freaking out. A lot of that stuff comes when you are younger and you kind of have to work through some things on your own, because a lot of the book the author is talking about um, so societal shifts. There was this rise in safetyism that started in the 90s, and it created less time for free play. Now, as I'm reading this, a lot of times when I read these books, part of the reason why I like to bring it to different audiences is we know in the Black communities, those of us who grew up in BIPOC communities, and especially Black and brown folk that were living in the urban environments, we remember when that shift happened, when we stopped being outside. And it was definitely created with the crack era. There was a pre-crack era and a post-crack era. And there's a book, Crack is King, that I'm going to be discussing in another book club, because that was dope too. Crack changed a lot for us, didn't it? We went outside in the 70s and the 80s. You could be 10 and 11 years old and go and visit your friend, and it wasn't a arranged play date. And this author didn't touch on that at all, and I don't know how familiar he was with every population and why those different populations embrace safetyism. But with the rise of everything from police brutality to drugs, it did make us feel as parents like we had to be more protective of our kids. And what happened? We went inside, and there was a loss with that. There's always a loss with things. So in addition to the technology, a huge part of this is acknowledging the fact that the over coddling of children and youth also produces anxiety. Because when they are able to just freely play from the time they're 3 years old, and then it becomes more about being exposed to friends, and sometimes you get rejected and you learn how to be rejected. You learn what no means before you have to really learn what no means. It's so many benefits to this. By 2014, teens were spending 20 hours a week making content across multiple accounts that were benefiting these oligarchs, because that's, at the end of the day, that's their platforms. That could have been spent on having a job, or spending time with your grandparents, your uncles, your aunts, being an apprentice, having a part-time job, learning those essential skills. But they were spending it on social media net sites. Another point that I thought was key was the reduction in rites of passage experiences. Remember things like Camp Minnesink and Koinonia, going to those churches might have had these rites of passages, or depending on different religions. I know Jews, they probably still do the bar mitzvahs, but there's a rites of passage that culminates with like that spiritual experience. Those all are giving boys and girls essential developmental experiences. Then there's those social milestones like getting your driver's license, entering a PG movie, later on down the line having healthy sexual experiences. All of those are on the decline, actually, amongst the younger people. And it's partly because of this this technology combined with them being so coddled that when it is time for them to venture into the real world, they're completely overwhelmed. There's a slide here. Let me see. That was the amount of time. Look at this, meeting up with friends every day. Kids are spending less time with each other, and it shows how from the 80s all the way from the 2010s and beyond, the amount of time 12th graders spend with each other decline in person. So that's pretty sad, because that's important to have that interaction with your friends, and what that does. Thanks, guys. What's up? He said he agrees. Yeah. So yeah, what do viewers think? What do you guys think? Please chime in and give us some chats. Tell us about how you benefited from outside and unstructured, because there is a lot of kids doing play now, but it's so structured. It's so like activity based. There's a benefit to that, but it's to an extent, it's kind of gotten out of control. The 4 foundational harms. So there are things the book said that, or the author poses, that are really being hijacked with these technology tools. So one is social deprivation. Teens and adolescents, it's important to have the opportunity for social learning. Now, this is something that I don't know if we're talking about it enough. But say I have a cousin named Brendan. Hey, Brendan. He lives in Atlanta. And he is a wonderful little boy, and he's an athlete. So he does a lot of, basketball. And then I have a cousin named Brandon. Now, my cousin, we're all related. Brandon is a young, maybe, I don't know if he's an X or maybe a millennial. And he is a phenomenal musician. He's you can check out his YouTube, Brandon's Booth. He has recently just won a big award. He took his kids down. He teaches music in Baltimore. And he took his kids down to Disney World to do this competition that he does every year. And they won, right? But the way the algorithms are set up now on Meta, they purposely, let's say Brendan had access to an account. I hope he doesn't, but say he does, because it's common now. So he has a Facebook page or he has Instagram. The algorithm will and Brandon posts about him going to Disney World, teaching these youth about music and winning this award. Phenomenal, all across the board. It will purposely suppress Brandon's content. And it will pump up a celebrity or someone who paid for content. So what it does is it's suppressing the real role models to promote these false idols. So now, instead of Brandon seeing that his cousin did this, or someone in the community is offering a chance for him to do his basketball at a free camp, it's showing Kylie Jenner or her boyfriend. And this has been proven. Actually, Mark Zuckerberg just was on last week saying that he switched the model. It's no longer about friends and family connecting. It's ad-based. But see, I don't know if we realize this, or if we did, we are utilizing the tool enough with that understanding that the local role models, especially that young people need, your friends and your family, or people that are out there that are doing positive things in the real world, needs to trump the fake social media stuff. And the more we realize that this is all kind of being manipulated behind the scenes, the better. So, and that's why we really don't, our kids really don't need to be on it. And we should probably minimize ours as well. Sleep deprivation is another way that it harms, especially youth. Like I was saying, there's a fundamental age growth that you need. Research shows that teens sleep less than 7 hours increases after smartphone, and they really need their sleep. The third is attention fragmentation, higher rates now of ADHD symptoms among young people with addictive social media use. And then finally, addiction. Social media designers use techniques to keep girls engaged for longer using rewards and novelties and emotions. This this picture here, this is from a book called The Facebook Files, and there was a quote that I saw in the book, and I had took note of it, and it was saying that we are overprotecting in the real world and underprotecting in the online world. And this other slide that shows the young lady in the middle, here we go, over to protection. This is a screenshot of an internal Facebook presentation brought out by Frances Hagen. And it's what it's showing is, yeah, Mina was saying she agrees she don't see kids outside playing anymore. You don't. And this is showing how there were, this is probably commonly known now that when these social sites were being set up, they wanted to figure out how to get people coming back engaged. So they followed some similar techniques to like the casinos. And so, for instance, it was discussed in the book that, it's dopamine. They were looking at how our brains work when it comes to rewards. And if someone makes a post and they know that every time they make the post, they're going to get 500 likes or comments, it doesn't give the same effect as if there's a randomness to it. So when they studied this, they wanted to design the algorithms in a way that it would get the young people coming back. And one of the there was a kid, because they have Anxious Generation has a website, and they had some young people that were one young man. He shared a quote or an experience of going away on a trip with his buddy, and his buddy had posted a picture on Instagram, and it only got 20 likes or a little bit of likes. And so the next picture, he spent like the whole afternoon in the hotel doctoring and filtering this image to try to get it up. Well, the problem is it's not really him. It's the algorithm. It might not be that picture is going to be shown because it's designed in a way to kind of have it where there's some level of, it's like a slot machine. So knowing this is really important. Information is power. If you know that, I'm not saying not to post the pic, but don't get all in your feelings because there's other factors as to why things are getting liked or not getting liked. I've even seen it where, people get frustrated with friends and family and this one and that one for not liking this stuff. Well, you don't even know if everybody's seeing it. Now, I do know there's some voyeurism going on. And I do know at times people don't share and support people. So I'm not dismissing that. That is a thing. But there's more than one thing happening. Two things can be true at once. This is the way this is designed. And especially now, they have switched to ad because remember, none of us are paying for this. We don't pay for Instagram and LinkedIn and these things. So they got to find another way to make money and they want to make a lot of money. That's how they're billionaires and oligarchs. So how they doing it is they're selling our data and that becomes the moneymaker. And they need you to keep coming back so that you have a lot of data that they can sell for, companies want that information so they can push products on us. So I'm not turning this into a whole conspiracy thing. I just want to inform our youth so that they're not going nuts. Now think about it. That boy went, parents probably paid for him to go to this trip to Pennsylvania, DC, wherever, and he didn't even get to enjoy it because he's in the room trying to post a pic and the pic may not see the light of day. It's falling in a black hole. We got to stop that. We got to get our youth back. Yeah. So, can any viewers relate to this online social media manipulation that's happening? Let's talk about it. So, girls, why is it more harmful for girls? So, the data showed that particularly adolescent girls, 11 to about 18, are really are really vulnerable to being addicted and to being having their self-worth and self-esteem because they're impacted by perfectionism and appearances. Girls are also more relational, like when it comes to, as the young lady talked about the video, the whole bullying thing. When a girl takes out their anger, they hit other girls' relationships. So they can, like, if they're, say if they were friends and they have a friend group and something happens and they have a fight, someone talks to someone else's boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, they can spread a lot of viciousness online and make the group be alienated. That is devastating for adolescent girls. That's the kind of stuff that is really happening in the social space. They're also more easier to share like their emotions and disorders. And there was something talked about where like now it's okay that these tools have helped raise awareness about conditions, but that doesn't mean we all got the same thing everybody has. So now you see this rise in girls sharing that they have disorders, and then this one, I got the disorder, I got the disorder, but they're not getting diagnosed. And some of them are saying, some of these mental health professionals are saying, they're coming in saying, no, you don't have that disorder, but there's a popularity in sharing that you have a condition that you might not have. And then finally, like girls are more subject to predators and harassment. There was a story of a girl who was 12 years old, and she talked about how online she got involved with this older man, and it took a toll on her for years. So that was a thing that happened, and her family had to get involved in the situation. And she was like, my mother was telling me I couldn't go outside, but she wasn't really protecting me online. That's the thing. It's hard being a parent. I know it's our parents, it's everyone is, they'll say, it's the parents' responsibility. Remember when the celebrity role models would say that? Raise your kids. Well, yeah, you're right. It is our responsibility. But when you've got forces as strong as this, come on. It's not just, it's hard. And then if everybody has it, and then they're the kid who doesn't have it. And that's why I wanted to bring this up, because I'm like, we got to do things as a collective. Let's have each other's back, because we're fighting against some very powerful forces. So yes, ultimately, parents got to raise their kids and be that first armor of protection, but it takes a village. The book also got into boys' well-being, and this gets into some different stuff. I'm getting ready to shift. Just want to check and see. Yeah, and if you have any viewers out there If you have pressure and danger to conform because of social media, let us know about that. So the book also talked about the decline in boys' mental well-being. There are um, some some real media sources, books, and movies that are talking about the decline of boys and men. There was a series on Netflix that has become very popular called Adolescence. It was very good. Check it out. And it took place in the UK. And it was a teen boy who was about 13 years old, who was, came from, he had a two-parent household. He had a older sibling, and he ends up getting accused of stabbing and killing this girl and it was due to a lot of this stuff online. They also went into the whole manosphere thing. I had just read an article a couple of weeks ago about this other young man. It was a young black boy in America. He was actually not a boy, he was a young man. And around 20, about 5 years ago, he got pulled into, they call it manosphere. And, that's a whole nother kind of conversation, but it is related to why some of our boys and men are feeling the way they have. Since the 70s, there's been a slow decline in the achievement of boys, but this is where we're not talking about it enough. A lot of times you'll hear these different podcasters and various people talk about how the boys, the girls will be like, well, I want a boy, I want a man who can take care of me. I want a man who is able to spend this kind of money. And if not, I don't feel like he's a man, and I shouldn't have to decline my goals. And no, you shouldn't. And then the men are out here pushing certain things about what makes you successful. Got it. But what we're not really discussing is there were societal reasons why in the 50s the boys and men were able to graduate at 18 years old and get that job that allowed them to get that house and that car and get the loans. And even with our men who were black men who were being cut out, due to redlining and the prison pipeline, there were still fundamental programs in place ever since World War II to build men up. Those programs aren't there anymore. So we can't really compare the 50s to now. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have standards, but if you're not investing in whole groups of people, whether they're boys or girls, you're going to get the results that we have. So there was this push that pushed the real boys away from education and employment opportunities and cultural changes. It's not just that they just got up and decided that they didn't want to do anything and they wanted to stay in the attic, the basement, and not. No, there were cultural things in society happening. So let's talk about that. It's similar to what the leader of the country is saying about make America great again. What was great? What was those factors that were great when men of all sorts of races and women are romanticized about a yesteryear? What were those factors that you think we can compare to now? Because if we look at it, it's apples and oranges. They're not investing. In fact, they're de-investing because Dodge just took away a whole bunch of government jobs, and many government jobs were a launching pad for men, especially African American families, to get into those middle class roles that allowed them to move up the ladder. And they're de-investing. So all these things pushed boys away from the real world and then pulled them into the online world that provided them an escape and social connections and fantasy and simulations. And that kind of had them taking less risks. which isn't healthy even for their testosterone levels. This isn't just happening in the United States. This slide here will show in Japan, there's a term called hikiki mori. I might not be saying it correct, but it's a Japanese term that means pulling in wood. They live like hermits, emerging from their caves mostly at odd hours when they're less likely to see anyone, including family members. In some families, parents leave food for them by their doors. Isn't that, and does that sound familiar? I've heard instances here, excuse me, in the United States where people have refrigerators and microwaves in their room. They just are in their room with hardly any contact. And some of them have felt so alone, and they just don't feel like the real world is there for them. Why is that though? That's what I meant by let's talk about the reasons. Because a lot of times now, excuse me, I think we're attacking people and vilifying groups of people, men or women or young, disease. But we're not getting into the reasons why this is happening. And then if we get into the reasons, what are the solutions so that this doesn't happen? But in a lot of these Western countries, this is a problem because eventually they're going to be 30s and 40 and 50. We're going to need them to take care of us. So if we're not investing, this is problematic. Video games and pornography was another, actually, I like this. I'm sorry, I didn't make a point. Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys. You'll see this book. I shout out to Dr. Kawanza Kunjufu, and he just became an ancestor. I'm really grateful that I read those books in high school, way before I even became a mother or knew that I would mother sons. But those are some really good books. We need them for the girls too, because it's like a conspiracy. So those are all some good resources. Let me get back to, so the author also talked about video games and pornography. And he did make the point that different from social media, where there's not too much benefit for adolescent girls, there are actually a lot of benefits to playing video games. And it has been studied that cognitive development and socialization comes from boys having access to video games. So I'm not telling the parents that you can't have your boys playing their video games. But 24/7, 365 days, I mean, it's gotten a lot. That's where the problem is. They're spending too much time playing video games, and it's causing addiction rates. There's also something that I wanted to make the point of when it came to even social media, and it's called opportunity costs. When you see these podcasts and these authors talk about like making money and being that next millionaire, a point that they often get into is your opportunity costs. So in life, when you're pursuing something or not pursuing something, there's always an opportunity cost. If I decide that I'm going to invest in 7 years in learning how to play the piano, I want to master the piano, I'm going to take 10 years and get my 10,000 hours so that I can become great. Well, it's not just that I'm investing in piano lessons. It's also all the things you're not doing. So when the ages from 11 to 17, the critical years, those are years that we could be getting future scientists and educators and diplomats and artists, and they're spending even, and guess what? They don't all have to be brilliant. We need architect, we need plumbers and HVACs. We need really great drivers out here. We also need food growers. That could be the time that they could be learning real life skills. We can't afford to have them be able to just spend 10 and 20 and 30 hours a week on video games and or socials or goofing off. They can have some fun, but then they need time to cultivate some real life skills. And it's more enjoyable because you meet people. And so all the way around, we got to get them off of the fake and back onto the real. By 2015, the other piece is the pornography. So pornography has always existed, and the author even said that he's not saying all pornography is harmful for people, but it's just too much pornography and it's causing overstimulation. And they've even done studies that have shown um, men and women being turned off by real people because the pornography gives them a warped sense of sexuality and what the human body looks like. So between the pornography, you being exposed to porn, and you're being exposed to all these filtered images, when you have a real woman and a real man in front of you, you don't even have that ability to be attracted to them so that you can have an enjoyable sexual experience. So this is what pornography is doing. And think about it. You're taking away one of the most exciting sexual times in a man or a woman's life is those years. So if they're just doing it with porn, they're really missing out. You know what I mean? Then there's another thing that's growing, which is these bots and AI. So AI and bots are replacing human beings, and people are turning to the AI and bots for sexual satisfaction. I read a book called Antibot last year, and it was something because it was a wealthy man, wealthy, and he spent a pretty penny on this bot that looked real, and he was, he could have all kinds of sexual engagement with her. But it was a bot. It was a computer. He was a divorced man, but because he felt he had some self issues that made him feel like he needed to turn to a bot instead of being able to engage with a real woman. This is going to rise. I know it might sound far fetched, but this is kind of the world we're in. So if we can get our younger people back to being able to associate with real humans and have conversations, build up their confidence, get them off the socials with all the faking, get them back out there in the real world, then they won't have to feel like they got to buy a bot to have an enjoyable life and partners. So, what do you all think about that? Because I mean, that I never would have thought when we was listening to Computer Love, that's not what I thought Computer Love was going to be. Um, and so spiritual elevation and degradation. So ultimately, this book is saying the rise of social media, these smartphones, and online living has contributed to basically a rise in the degradation of society. Am I wrong? I mean, well, I didn't write the book, but is the author wrong? No. There's rises with polarized, there's celebrity idolatry, this sense of showing deference is determined by an algorithm. People are more impatient, less inclined to give grace. There's a lot of trolling happening. And things like stillness and communal worship, prayer and silence, we're not in, the churches and the mosques the way that we used to be. And then there's this rising group think. And all of this is related to this technology. It has its place. I'm using it for this. I appreciate it and I'm grateful, but we shouldn't let it rule us. So, Get then in the book finally gets into some solutions. I don't want to constantly be out here complaining about things without offering solutions. So there's radical reforms. This is what this author is suggesting. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Legislation. He proposes we do need some legislation and age verifications requiring for social media accounts. He strongly believes that no one before the age of 16 should have their own social media account. If they use social media, they should, have access to it through like a guardian's account. Also, there's a movement. He believes in phone free schools. When my son was in high school at East, I was on the parent governance council and we voted to go phone free. And I'm proud of that. That school was able to turn around their graduation rates. Um, Back around 2017, the school was in danger of being taken over by the state. And through a lot of partnerships and various changes, was able to change things around. And one of the things that we instituted was phone free schools. More unsupervised play and childhood independence is another reform. Let's see. Another one that was talked about was not punishing parents who give their children real world freedom. There was a story that he told in the book about this parent that hold on y'all one sec. I have to grab my charger. I'll be right back. Oh, I don't know how I became muted again. So this parent, I'm saying this again in case I got cut off a little bit. Her parent, the parent took her kid to McDonald's where she was working. The daughter asked if she could go to the park the next day, and she said sure. So she starts going to the park. Someone came up to the girl in the park and asked her where she where was her mother? And she said her mother was at work and they called CPS and tried to remove the daughter out of the home. So the author was saying that right now, even our policies are anti child because children need free play. But if you are punishing parents for allowing them the ability to let their kids get what they need, then we're never going to be able to give them what they need. So that's why we all need to collaborate with this. Encouraging more play in schools, recess development. I worked with this coalition back about 10 years ago called Healthy Kids. And shout out to Common Ground Health, which is a local not for profit that does a lot of like work around health equity and making the community better. They had a whole coalition just on play. It was called Play Best and helping kids have access to like streets that was safe and having bicycle lanes. Someone, can you put that comment back up from Terry? Did you ever think there'd be an option to be with? No, I never thought it would be an option to be with a robot. Not like that. I mean, we had, remember Small World? There was a show I used to like when I was little called Small World. And the little girl was a bot, but not like, not like this. Thank you, Terry, for that comment. But yeah, getting back to what I was what I was saying was that yeah, Common Ground had this coalition and they actually are still doing their work to try to give kids and adults access to like, being able to go and go for a walk. There was this great program called Conky Cruisers, run by Teresa Bowick. She's since moved to Hawaii, but she started this bicycling program in a very difficult part of the city to try to change the norm around physical activity. So those were all like dope things. And we need to increase that. We used to have in the 70s block parties. And I think we should bring those back. I think, and those could really be fun if you think about it. Those were great. Double Dutch and playing games and just really doing those things. And they didn't even cost a lot. Nowadays you feel like you got to throw money at everything. But the stuff that just was about like building community, those are the things that I think we can get back to in the time and bring it into the world we're in now. There's no going back. You're not going to make America great again. There's moving forward. But then we could take those elements of things that made those different eras great and try to move forward now. Another point that the book made was we need more male teachers and more male pipelines into apprenticeships, because boys learn differently and they have different needs. So maybe there's like stuff where they can put their hands on. And at 12 and 13, I remember this time period where I won't say any names, but I did have a cousin who was really, really good in wood shopping. And I think that he had gotten this message that that wasn't good enough. So he went down another path. And that was bad messaging. It was fine to do things with your hands, because one of my cousins who's way older, John, he he's retired now, but man, he can do amazing work in homes. And then he apprenticed his grandson, who's a fabulous architect now, living in Australia, saw his grandfather building and landscaping beautiful homes throughout Queens. There was nothing wrong with doing things with your hands, but there was this mentality that was being pushed that those types of jobs and roles weren't good enough. And it messed a lot of people up because they would have done those things, but people were like saying, no, that's not good. You're not going to make money, or you're not going to be successful, or a woman ain't going to want to marry you, whatever the messages are. Remember that whole Joe the plumber thing? It was one of the presidential campaigns, and they were like low key dissing Joe the plumber, when now we need more plumbers. And think about how much we spent on that. So it's the messaging. It's some real bad messaging out here, and it steers people the wrong way. So those opportunities for vocation and apprenticeships are great. Children across the board, they just need more real experiences. And so lastly, I want to know though, and I want to offer this, because like I said, when I started this conversation, the whole a key reason why I got this book was I wanted to know, oh my goodness, the anxious generation, they're anxious. What can we do for them? And they really didn't focus on that in the book. I think this is a preventative book and a preventative movement, which we need. I want to also say to those of you who were out there, or the parents, or the girlfriends or boyfriends or grandparents of those that were impacted by this experiment that happened, we need to rally around. I do think somebody needs to pay. I'd love to hear you all's suggestions, but I think some money needs to be invested in restorative practices. But for those individuals, right now, go tech free as much as possible. I'm not saying eliminate it, but figure out ways in your life that you can just go more analog. Take actions in the real world each day. Shift to wellness activities. Focus on your sleep. Get a hobby that is non-social media based. And you might need to go into some CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, to help you heal from the damage, because we got to take our health and our well-being back into our own destiny, into our own hands, because these big tech companies are they want to make the money. And now it's all about pushing product. So they'll be pushing products, and product isn't just the product. It's not just the lipsticks or the cups. It's crafting these lifestyles around it. And they have all kind of slick ways that they and slick people that they're using. Even some people that look like us that are very, very successful, they're being utilized too to help push certain things. So we just got to be aware. And I really feel really passionate about it. So that's why this was a full discussion, deep dive that I wanted to do on this anxious generation. So that wraps. We got any more comments out there? Oh, thank you, April. We're gonna post the show. We'll edit it a little bit, clean up some stuff, and we'll post it. I just also wanted to mention I got another book coming. I'll be doing matriarch. So that's going to be next up. Tina Knowles' memoir. I'm excited to read that, especially as we get into Mother's Day. And so look for that coming up. And then I got some other really, really, fun books to discuss. There's one that I'm reading now that's incredible called A Sky Full of Elephants. There's one more comment that just flashed around. Let me see if I can address that before we go. Can you flash that? How much is this our fault for not paying attention to our kids more, Reva? Yeah, we got to take some responsibility for it. We do. That's a part of it. And even now, a lot of people push their kids in front of a screen. And parents, we can't do that. It takes more. It does. It takes more effort. You know what I read? One of the parts of the book that really upset me. Some of these individuals who run these sites and they send their kids to like the top-notch schools, guess what? They're not allowed to have the technology. So that's like me inviting you over for dinner, and I make, all sorts of food and all of that. I give you the food. You like, you're not eating? And I'm like, well, no, because it's not good for you. Well, you eat, I'm giving you the food to eat, but I'm not going to eat it. And I'm not going to give my kids the food because the food isn't healthy, but I'll let you eat it. That's kind of what's happening, because I could go on and on. But so great discussion. Thank you for those of you who participated. I appreciate it. We're going to clean this up, drop it out there for you. Please like and share. And it's going to be more to come. We got a lot of stuff. I like doing these discussions through the lens of books. So we're going to be talking about all kind of stuff. So have a great Saturday. Happy Mother's Day weekend, and love you all.